So, Wish Ender's good now, huh? I mean, I've always personally liked it in PvP, and I may be one of the select few that does, but in PvE? There's been a good bit of chatter around this weapon since it was buffed here in Season of Plunder. So, what's changed? Well, a few things actually. One, Wish Ender now has intrinsic anti-barrier capabilities. The double hit from the arrow has been changed to a triple hit in most cases. Damage versus champions, majors, and mini-bosses has been upped by 10%. And the draw time has been reduced by a whole 8 milliseconds.
That's the best you can do!
But in lieu of all these changes, and given the fact that I haven't had a reason to talk about Wish Ender in quite some time, we'll break it down. Perks, traits, stats, PvP, PvE, damage, utility, the whole nine. And we'll see how the old bow's holding up. If you do end up enjoying this video though, like, comment, subscribe, share it with some friends. It helps the video, it helps the channel, and your support is always greatly appreciated. Let's get things rolling though, with a look at the stats and perks. Wish Ender is an exotic kinetic combat bow with a draw time of 820 milliseconds and a recoil direction of 60, causing this weapon to jump to the right when the arrow releases. For this weapon's stats, we do have strong marks in accuracy and stability, average airborne effectiveness, but the handling, reload, and aim assist do leave a little bit to be desired. The intrinsic trait on Wish Ender is Queen's Wrath. While aiming down sights with a fully drawn bow, combatants behind walls are highlighted, and arrows pierce shields. Strong against anti-barrier champions. And we more or less have two exotic perks on Wish Ender. First, anti-taken fletching, specialized to fight taken targets. The second is Broadhead, a piercing arrowhead that damages targets on entry and exit. One shot can overpenetrate multiple targets. And there is no exotic catalyst available for Wish Ender at the time of recording this video. But if you've yet to acquire the bow itself, it is still available by completing an exotic quest that is linked to the Shattered Throne dungeon. But with that, let's hop into the PvE section and start putting Wish Ender to the test. And not a whole lot to touch on as far as general functionality goes, but we do have a few points. Wish Ender does now have anti-barrier and all the fringe benefits that come along with it. Shoot through Knight and Phalanx shields, through Hydra barriers, hobgoblins through their immunity, you know the drill. It's anti-barrier, but intrinsically on the weapon now. It does overpenetrate enemy targets, so if you do have a few of them lined up, you can clip them all with a single arrow. When the bow is fully drawn and you're aiming down sights, you basically gain True Sight, or the ability to see enemies through walls. Kinda more of a PvP thing, but it does work in PvE as well. Sometimes at least. It does seem to be a bit inconsistent at the moment. And then there's anti-taken fletching. We're going to be doing extra damage to taken enemies. 10% to be exact. I'll show you this in the damage testing, but you're just going to have to take my word on it for now. And lastly, your draw indicator is located directly on the bow's frame. Your perfect draw is achieved when that meter fills up to the tip of the sword. But I think we're ready to hop into some damage testing. But as always, do keep in mind,
PvE damage numbers are variable and will change depending on content scaling or enemy tier. This is why I try to keep all of my testing in the Conflux Lost sector on Nessus versus Karl the Colossus to keep these damage numbers consistent and comparable from video to video.
When landing a shot versus Karl, we can see the aforementioned triple damage values here. 10,751 on a perfectly drawn crit for the entry damage, and 11,367 for each of the exiting damage hits. 33,485 in total. A body shot scores 5,992 on entry, and the same 11,367 for the exit values. 28,726. So while the entry loses almost half of its total damage, when considering the exit damage as well, we're only losing 14% by landing a body shot as opposed to a crit. But when timing things out and trying to get each draw as perfect as I possibly could, I was able to draw and fire the 5 arrows in 7.37 seconds. Maximum damage that could be delivered on all crits is 167,425, so damage per second, 22,717, which is pretty darn solid given the fact that we are looking at a long-range primary. For a comparison, we'll run it against Lay Monarch, which is a bit more utility rich, but just in terms of single target damage. On a crit, the arrow's gonna deliver 10,923 points of damage, and then see 8 poison ticks at 1,085 points of damage apiece. Totaling that out, 19,603 per shot. That'd be 98,015 points of damage delivered over the course of 5 arrows, which I was able to fire off in 6.2 seconds. Lay Monarch's damage per second, right around 15,809. And just to give you a quick sense of where Wish Ender's single shot damage falls, at base, a kinetic aggressive frame sniper rifle like Silicon Aroma is going to crit Karl for 31,183, 2,300 points of damage less than a single shot from Wish Ender. So I mean, the per arrow damage is no joke. But as I mentioned earlier, we also will see bonus damage against a taken target. I had to head over to the Cavern of Souls on the EDZ for a taken lost sector boss, but the damage scaling does line up. But you can see here, 11,826 on the entry, and 12,504 on the exits. So 36,834 per arrow, a flat 10% damage increase. Not a ton, but hey, more damage is more damage. For Wishender's performance in PvE, my general assessment, I like it in higher level content, I hate it in our standard activities. When the difficulty knobs turned up just a little bit, that really feels like where Wishender can find some footing. Enemies just inherently have more health, so that high single shot damage can really shine through, especially considering the fact we're working with a weapon that does have unlimited ammo. It's a reliable long-range weapon, which can feed right into what is often required for the most difficult content. You can pick off enemies from a distance with pinpoint accuracy not required, while keeping yourself safe. Then intrinsic anti-barrier is not only nice for stunning anti-barrier champions, but the passive benefits like we talked about in the functionality section always seem to prove useful at some point. And if you are heading into content where taken enemies are present, you are going to get a little extra pop from each arrow. But in lower end activities, Wishender feels a bit unnecessary. The single shot damage is actually overkill for most targets. And while the DPS is good for what it is, 23k in terms of DPS isn't exactly melting bosses. Plus, it isn't a very responsive weapon. Slow reload, low handling, and long draw time. It can feel very sluggish, especially in larger group matchmade activities like Dares of Eternity or Catch Crash, where you're basically fighting your teammates for kills to begin with. And there's always a chance that you could miss out on some of the arrow exit damage. It usually happens when you're shooting at a target that's moving at a pretty good clip, or when you have an odd angle at the enemy. But sometimes you're just not going to get all 3 damage ticks. Something else worth noting, Overload Bow is in the seasonal artifact currently, but you can't double dip on anti-champion functionality. Now, it's kinda odd because when you draw the bow, the overload shot prompt will appear on screen, but this is not going to stun an overload champion. As with all intrinsic anti-champion exotics, what you got is what you get. Lastly, there are 2 long-range anti-barrier exotics in the kinetic slot, Wishender and Arbalest. Wishender does have the big benefit of having limitless ammo, but Arbalest does crit for about 16k more damage, versus Carl at least. But also, it tears down elemental shields in a hurry thanks to the compounding force intrinsic trait, making it really useful when working under the match game modifier. There's definitely a push and pull as to which one's going to be the better option for a given activity, and ultimately, that decision's going to be up to you. With that though, let's hop into the PvP section. In the Crucible, Wishender's going to score combined 159 points of damage on a crit and 102 points of damage to the body. So all you need is 2 body shots to down a full health guardian, just like all other precision frame bows. And if you want to time it out with 2 full draws, that's probably going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 2, maybe 2.5 seconds, depending on how good your timing is with the arrow release. Now in the past, this could one-shot low resilience guardians with a 20% damage buff like an Empowering Rift or High Energy Fire. Those are now 15% buffs in the Crucible. Total damage with a 15% buff is 184 on a crit. That's just not gonna do it, not even against a tier 0 resilience guardian. But you can tag multiple enemies with a single arrow, just like in PvE. This isn't exactly a common occurrence in-game, but with Mrs. Ironworker and Agent Sparkles perfectly lined up, both targets do take the full crit and exit damage from the arrow. And just like with all bows, physical range is going to be a non-factor. Regardless of how far away you are from a target, if you can put the arrow on the enemy, you will see full damage. And rather than give you my full standard performance rundown for PvP, I'm just going to speak candidly about my experiences using the bow just recently. I think we all kind of get the point. Single shot damage, good. See-through walls, good. Bow really slow, bad. Now, I really appreciated the utility this bow provided in the past. I liked sitting back, playing passively, and always knowing where the enemy was coming from. I knew I was never going to slay out with this strategy, but it kept me entertained, and depending on how a match progressed, sometimes it was mildly effective. But just the general pace of play in the Crucible feels like it got the dial turned up a little bit. And not just in Eruption Iron Banner where I was capturing a lot of this footage, Guardians are just moving around faster, especially if they're amplified. I think there's probably more movement abilities than there ever has been in the past, and even though Bungie had said a while back that they want to shift the focus back towards primary gunplay, I think general ability usage feels as high, if not higher, than it ever has before. In my experience at least. But none of this really bodes well for Wishender. I mean, when using the bow, you're very susceptible to getting pushed. The slow draw time and low handling are its big handicaps. Before, I was always able to offset that with more passive play. But with the speed at which enemy guardians can close the gap now, it feels like nowhere is really safe to use Wishender. A lot of times I'd see an enemy off in the distance through my true sight and think, they might be heading this way. Shift my attention elsewhere for just a moment, look back, and they're right on top of me. And by that time, it's not like you're gonna get a shot off with the bow. It's get your offhand weapon out and hope you can defend yourself with it. And I was kinda bummed that Wishender just felt so out of place now. I mean, I don't think it was ever an optimal weapon for PvP, but I felt like sometimes I could change a Crucible match into a chess game. If I had a good strategy, if I chose my engagements, if I was careful with my positioning, I could find some success with the bow. But in the Demolition Derby that is the Crucible now, I just found a really hard time getting going with it. You know, sometimes it had those flashes of brilliance that I remember, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, here we go, but they were always short-lived. I just had a hard time finding any footing in the Crucible with Wishender right now. So my take on Wishender in PvP, I want to love the bow, but I also want to feel like a semi-competent Crucible player still, which makes me not want to use the bow currently. But hey, at least it's performing better in PvE. Wishender saw some really good tangible changes on that side of the game, and I always appreciate it when Bungie takes the time to go back and update an older exotic, and I think they did a good job with Wishender. From where it was to where it is now, in PvE, it's a big leap forward. But hey, if you did enjoy the video, please remember to leave it a like, and consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel if you're not already, to catch more of my Destiny 2 content in the near future. If you want to keep tabs on me over on Twitter, you can look for Ironworker814 over there, and be sure to drop a comment down below if you have anything to add. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this weapon breakdown. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.